They called her a liability, a ghost haunting her own career. They were about to ground her for insubordination. But they had no idea the secrets her uniform was hiding, secrets that would change everything in that med bay. The air in the medical bay of the Star Carrier Vigilance was cold, thin, and smelled of ozone and antiseptic, the scent of sterile consequence. Admiral Thorne stormed in, his face a thundercloud of controlled fury, a data slate clutched in his white-knuckled hand. His target, Major Anya Echo Petrova, stood beside an examination table, her posture ramrod straight, betraying none of the pain he knew she had to be in. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe bun, and her ice-blue eyes met his without a flicker of fear. Major, Thorne's voice was a low growl, cutting through the rhythmic beep of a nearby heart monitor. You have the gall to stand there as if you didn't just detonate a hornet's nest in a sector we were ordered to merely observe. 3 wounded, Petrova. A successful mission, Command is calling it. I call it a catastrophic failure of discipline. The data slate in his hand held her file, a document he'd memorized. It painted a picture of a brilliant but increasingly erratic officer. Yesterday's unsanctioned engagement was the final straw. The whispers in the command channel were unanimous, it was time to ground Anya Petrova. Permanently. Show me, he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. Without a word, Anya's hands moved to the hem of her tactical undershirt. She lifted the fabric, revealing the fresh wound bisecting her abdomen. It wasn't a clean line, but a raw, violent canyon of flesh held together by gleaming metallic staples. Bruising radiated outwards in ugly shades of violet and jaundiced yellow. It was a serious injury, enough to put any other officer on medical leave for a month. But it wasn't the new wound that made Admiral Thorne's breath catch in his throat. It was the landscape beneath it. His eyes, trained to assess battlefield damage and strategic weaknesses, were transfixed by the intricate, horrifying tapestry of old scars that covered her rib cage. It was a mosaic of past atrocities. Some were fine, precise lines, almost surgical in their neatness. Others were jagged, starburst-shaped welts, thick and raised, speaking of crude, brutal force. It was a map of suffering, a story written in damaged flesh that her official file, with its sanitized language, had never even hinted at. Minor injuries sustained during 72 hours of captivity. The phrase from her report echoed in his mind, now sounding like a grotesque, deliberate lie. The scars before him weren't from 72 hours of anything. They spoke of systematic, prolonged torture. Some appeared exploratory, invasive. Others were clearly burns, placed with a cruel precision meant to maximize agony without hitting vital organs. The pattern was too methodical for combat, too varied for any single accident. My God, Major, Thorne's voice was barely a whisper, his anger evaporating into a cold, rising dread. What is this? Anya let her shirt fall, her face a mask of detached composure. A childhood medical condition, sir, she said, her tone as level and efficient as if she were delivering a mission briefing. Congenital rib deformities. Required multiple corrective surgeries between the ages of 8 and 16. The lie was delivered perfectly. But as she spoke, Thorne noticed her right hand, by her side, had clenched into a fist so tight the knuckles were bone white. It wasn't a sign of dishonesty. It was a sign of rage, caged and controlled with terrifying discipline. He wasn't a doctor, but he had seen the work of surgeons and the work of torturers. This was not the work of anyone trying to heal a child. Admiral Thorne stared at her, the sterile hum of the med bay filling the sudden, heavy silence. He took a step closer, his mind racing, trying to reconcile the stoic, brilliant officer before him with the evidence of unimaginable suffering she carried. The childhood surgery explanation was an insult to his intelligence, and they both knew it. You're asking me to believe that, Major, he pressed, his voice low and dangerous. You're asking me to believe pediatric surgeons work like that. I'm not asking you to believe anything, sir, Anya replied, her gaze unwavering. A faint flush crept up her neck, not of embarrassment, but of contained fury. I'm stating what is in my official medical history. Thorne felt a chill that had nothing to do with the medbay's temperature. A cover-up. A massive one. He closed the remaining distance between them, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Petrova, whatever happened to you is not in any file I have access to. I need to know what I'm dealing with. If there's a security breach, a compromised officer. There is no breach and no cover-up, sir, she cut him off, a shocking breach of protocol that he barely registered. She finally lowered her shirt completely. There is only what was necessary. Necessary for what? For me to continue serving, she said, her voice flat. For certain parties to save face. For operations in sensitive regions to continue without diplomatic incidents. The arrangement benefits everyone. The word arrangement hung in the air, cold and sharp. Who authorized this arrangement? Thorne demanded. Anya's eyes met his. Admiral Blackwood, sir. Before his retirement. Blackwood. Of course. The former fleet commander, a man known for his ruthlessly pragmatic solutions that often danced on the edge of legality. He had also been Anya's first mentor, the one who had personally recruited her from the academy. And what, exactly, Thorne asked, his voice tight, did this arrangement entail? Anya's posture, if possible, became even more rigid. I was recovered after 9 weeks, sir. Not 72 hours. The additional time does not officially exist. The nature of my injuries, and the information extracted during that time, were deemed sensitive. Redacted from all but the highest level security records. She took a shallow breath. The psychological impact was addressed privately, through channels authorized by Admiral Blackwood. I am fit for duty, sir. 9 weeks. The number slammed into Thorne's mind with the force of a physical blow. 63 days. He suddenly recontextualized every report he'd ever read about her since her return, her obsessive work ethic, her volunteering for every high-risk mission, her social isolation. The command staff had labeled it PTSD, a sign of instability. They were wrong. It was something else entirely. He looked down at the data slate in his hand, at the official lie of 72 hours, then back up at the woman who had survived 9 weeks of what those scars implied. Suddenly, her insubordination yesterday didn't seem like recklessness. It seemed like something born from a place of knowledge so dark, no one else could possibly comprehend it. Admiral Thorne felt the foundation of his reality shift. He leaned against the examination table, the data slate in his hand now feeling like a prop in a play he hadn't known he was a part of. He was no longer a commander disciplining a subordinate, he was an explorer who had stumbled upon a hidden, uncharted territory of human endurance. Your record, he began, his voice softer now, shows you've never taken extended leave, apart from the mandatory 6 weeks after your recovery. He flipped through the digital pages, but he was seeing them for the first time. 3 consecutive deployments without rotation. You volunteered for every high-risk op in the sector. You refused promotion twice because it would have moved you to a desk. He looked up, truly seeing her now. Most officers with half your commendations would be angling for a comfortable post at the academy. Teaching strategy. Growing old. I'm more useful in the field, Admiral. Or perhaps, he countered, watching her reaction with hawk-like intensity, you believe you're more expendable in the field. A flicker of something, resignation, perhaps, crossed her eyes before being extinguished. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. You didn't come here to discuss my career path, she said, her tone matter-of-fact. You came to relieve me of command because yesterday's operation deviated from parameters, and the brass needs a scapegoat for the casualties. Thorne allowed a grim, humorless smile. That was the plan, yes. Then with all due respect, sir, let's not pretend this is about my leave schedule. The sheer audacity, the directness, it was breathtaking. Fair enough, Major. But my curiosity is piqued. Most people who endure, what I now suspect you endured, they either break, or they demand consideration. Lighter duties. Therapeutic accommodations. A quiet corner of the galaxy. I don't need special consideration to do my job, sir. No, evidently not, Thorne mused. In fact, you consistently exceed expectations. Your tactical decisions under fire are described as unervingly precise. Your ability to anticipate enemy movements has been called almost preternatural. He paused. I wonder if your superiors would have used those terms if they knew what I now know. He had been sent here to ground a liability, a perceived maniac whose trauma was making her a danger to her crew. But the woman in front of him wasn't a maniac. She was a weapon. Forged in a fire no one had dared to document. The command structure hadn't been managing a damaged officer, they had been tragically misusing a genius, a one-of-a-kind asset they didn't even know they had. They saw her as a problem to be contained, when in fact, she was a solution they had been too blind to deploy correctly. Captain Mercer notes here, Thorne continued, tapping the data slate, that you've never once used the trauma support services available to all personnel. Despite his direct recommendation after the Karachi incident last year. I have my own methods for processing stress, Admiral. Such as? With respect, sir. That's personal. Thorne nodded slowly. The thing is, Major, when an officer consistently refuses support, it raises questions about their psychological fitness. When that same officer takes increasingly calculated risks. My risks are never calculated to endanger my team, Anya interrupted, the first real crack in her composure. Every decision I make is to minimize casualties. At what cost to yourself? Thorne pressed, his voice sharp. 3 injuries requiring medical intervention in the past year alone. The medical officer tells me you checked yourself out against advice each time. I heal quickly. That's not the point, and you know it, Thorne said, stepping closer. I've been in this service for 32 years. I've seen what happens to operators who use the field as a form of self-punishment. It never ends well. Anya's jaw tightened. Is that what you think I'm doing? Punishing myself? I think you survived something terrible, and instead of processing it, you've channeled it into your work. That can be effective, until it isn't. He tapped her file. Your psych evals all say the same thing, exceptional compartmentalization skills. But compartments, Major, they eventually break. For the first time, she looked away. What do you want from me, Admiral? I want to understand why an officer with your abilities made the call you made yesterday, Thorne said carefully. I've read the intelligence. It was inconclusive at best. Not to me, she said, her gaze snapping back to his, sharp and certain. Explain. Anya seemed to weigh her words. The communications chatter we intercepted, the pattern matched one I've seen before. 3 short, almost subaudible clicks. A 5-second pause of absolute silence. Then a single, longer acknowledgement tone. That's not in any of our signals intelligence protocols. No, sir. It wouldn't be, she said, her voice dropping, her right hand unconsciously moving to her side, where the worst of the scarring lay hidden. It's a preparation sequence. For an immediate purge operation. It's not something you'd find in a manual. The implication hung in the sterile air, heavy and suffocating. This was knowledge gained firsthand. This was intelligence carved not into a data chip, but into her very bones. Thorne felt a wave of cold realization wash over him. My God, he breathed. You recognized a pattern no one else could. You made a call based on information you couldn't possibly share in the moment. Yes, sir. Intelligence that saved lives, he finished, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. Her actions weren't reckless. They were devastatingly, perfectly informed. Admiral Thorne walked to the viewport, staring out at the vast, stardusted blackness. The entire command structure had failed this woman. They had seen her trauma as a weakness, a bug in her system to be managed. They never considered it could be a feature, a source of unparalleled insight. He turned back to her. "There's something I still don't understand, Major. The mission you volunteered for next week. Operation Nightingale's Song." He saw her stiffen almost imperceptibly. "What about it, sir?" "It's a suicide mission, and we both know it," Thorne said bluntly. "Extraction of 3 intelligence assets from the Khorasan Dead Zone. Deep in territory controlled by the same group that held you." He let the words sink in. "You specifically requested to lead the team. I want to know why." A long moment of silence stretched between them. When Anya finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but it held the density of a collapsing star. "Because no one else understands what those assets are experiencing right now. No one else knows what they need to survive. Not just physically, but mentally. You think your experience gives you an edge." "I know it does, sir," she said, standing up from the table, wincing from the pull on her fresh wound but pushing through it. "I know the facility they're being held in. I know the guard rotation patterns, the blind spots in their security, the psychological tactics they use to break their prisoners." Thorne's brow furrowed. "How could you possibly know all that?" "The intelligence briefing only confirmed the location last week." Anya met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw the full, terrifying weight of her past in her eyes. "Because it's the same facility where I was held, sir." The words hit Thorne with the force of a shockwave. The official record, the one Blackwood had fabricated, said she was recovered during a separate operation. Another lie. "You escaped," he stammered. The idea was absurd. No one escaped the Khorasan detention centers. She gave a single, sharp nod. "On my 58th day. I made it 12 kilometers before a Spec Ops team stumbled upon me. Their own rescue mission had failed, but they found me, half dead, trying to reach an extraction point I'd memorized weeks earlier. And this information isn't in any report because the failure of that official rescue was a political embarrassment," she finished for him, her voice devoid of emotion. "Because my escape revealed security flaws they wanted to exploit later. Because admitting how long I was really held would have raised uncomfortable questions. Take your pick, sir. The decision was made above both our pay grades." She took a step closer, her presence filling the room. "I don't need a map, Admiral. I can smell the mildew in Corridor 3, where the pipes always leak. I know the sound the door to cell Block C makes, a sigh, right before it opens. I know the night guard, Ivan, smokes in a surveillance blind spot every 2 hours. These assets have been there for almost 3 months. They are at their breaking point. I am not volunteering for this mission because I have a death wish. I am volunteering because I am the only person in this fleet who can bring them home alive." Admiral Thorne looked at the woman before him, no longer seeing a reckless major, but a figure of almost mythical resilience. She hadn't just survived, she had studied her own hell with the meticulous focus of a scholar, turning it into a fortress of knowledge. He moved to the examination table and picked up her data slate, then decisively deleted the disciplinary report he had been prepared to file. "When I came in here today, Major, I had every intention of removing you from active duty," he said, his voice filled with a new, profound respect. "The consensus was that you were a liability. I now believe you may be the most valuable asset in this entire fleet." He closed the file. "I'm approving your request to lead Operation Nightingale's Song. But with conditions." Anya waited, silent. "First, you will provide a complete, detailed intelligence debrief. Everything you know. Second, you will submit to a full medical evaluation 3 days before deployment. If you are not physically ready, you will coordinate from the command center. This is not negotiable." She gave a stiff nod. "Understood, sir." "What else?" "Third," the Admiral said, his voice softening, "after this mission is complete, successful or not, you will take 60 days of mandatory leave. Real leave. Sir, I don't need. This isn't about what you need, Major. It's about what the service needs, Thorne interjected firmly. You are too valuable to burn out. And that is exactly where you are headed. He saw a flicker of genuine uncertainty, of confusion, in her eyes. 60 days, she murmured, as if the concept was a foreign language. What would I even do? The question, so honest and revealing, struck the Admiral with a surprising wave of protective concern. Learn how to live, not just how to survive, Major, he said gently. That's an order. He moved to the door, then paused. Your value isn't measured by how much pain you can endure. It's measured by your judgment and your leadership. Don't make me regret this. I won't, sir, she said, and he believed her. As the door hissed shut behind him, Thorne stood in the corridor, the universe of his command realigned. He had come to ground an officer and had instead unleashed her. He made a mental note to review the files of every operator flagged for erratic behavior after a traumatic event. Perhaps, he reflected, the system was wrong. Perhaps some cracks weren't weaknesses to be patched. Perhaps they were the very places where the light got in, forging soldiers into something stronger, more knowing, and infinitely more capable of navigating the darkness. Anya Petrova's story challenges our understanding of trauma, strength, and sacrifice. Do you think Admiral Thorne made the right call? Can a person's greatest pain become their most powerful weapon? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. Comment respect. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more explorations into the depths of the human spirit.